Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. In the studio is our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham, and calling in from the road, Los Angeles, California, is our friend and trusted producer, Max Kerman. Max, we haven't done a podcast in quite some time. I feel like the people are getting antsy.
I know, I'm getting antsy. It feels like it's been forever, so I'm glad we're doing this. I'll be back next week, though, and we can have a proper hang, but I'm glad we're doing this in the meanwhile.
Yeah, I feel like it's been like this confluence of events where it was like I was in Mexico on vacation, which I did the call-in for that one, and then I was back, and Winona was sick, so I was basically with her, but you were already gone, because you've been gone for a bit now. So it's just like none of us have really been in the same room. Intern Erica is, I think, out west, or she was out west amongst the mountains. If you listen to the podcast, you know that she finds that very refreshing and and life-altering. Yeah. So hopefully she had a good time out there, but she's not back yet with the pod. But yeah, we're back. I mean, there's lots going on. We'll talk about what you're doing in LA. We have Shaney here. One thing I didn't actually talk about, and I'd meant to talk about from the trip, where I wanted to share it when I got back, is you know how we were with three of our friends, three other Champagne boys, Sean and Jug and Felix. One of the things that happened, which was crazy, was we had this like night out with the guys where we all sort of brought the kids out, and we let the ladies have like a big night out, and so we're sitting in this like this Italian restaurant, because these resorts always have like 6 different restaurants on the premises. Like, oh, there's a steakhouse, there's the Italian place, there's a Mexican place, whatever. And Jug gets up because we were in the Mexican place, and they were doing like sort of tortillas and stuff, but they had stuff for kids. But I guess he wanted to get some cucumbers from like the main buffet area, so it's like in a separate area.
Cucumbers?
So cucumbers for his son.
Oh, okay.
So we've all got like our kids. So like I'm looking after Win, Sean's looking after his kids, Felix looking after his kids, and Jug's like, I'm gonna go get some cucumbers, and we're like, I'm not even really paying attention, and so he gets up and he goes to get the cucumbers, and we all just keep doing our thing. He comes back maybe like 10 minutes later, and he sits down and he says, "Where's Alex?" Like his son. And we kind of look up, and like honestly, at first we kind of think he's joking. We're like, "Isn't he with you?" And he's like, "No." And we're like, "Oh my God!" Like Sean's like, "Well, he followed you out, like when you went to get cucumbers." And so like we just assumed that they went together to go get cucumbers for Alex, or I guess, right? You're just kind of doing your own thing. So Jug jumps up, and he like, I'm like, "You go back," because he probably followed you to the buffet. Like maybe he followed you around, maybe still at the buffet. So he runs out. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is like crazy." Sean gets up and starts walking around the restaurant. We're like, well, hopefully he comes walking back in with Alex. He comes walking back in. You know, he's got a look on his face like this is panic. Like, you know, this resort is huge. There's a ton of people there. So at this point, we're kind of like, oh shit, like this is crazy. So I jump up and I go out on like the patio, thinking maybe we went to the patio. Sean's kind of walking around the restaurant. Jug has run back outside into like the main area where there's like, you know, a pool and all this stuff. And Felix,
did he ever get the cucumbers, or did he?
He came back with the cucumbers the first time, and then that's when he's like, "Where's Alex?" I got the cucumbers. So we're like, "Felix, stay with the kids." So now he's at the table with like, like 5 kids, while me, Sean, and Jug are out. We've spread out. We're looking for Alex. Like I go to the buffet, I cannot find him. Jug comes like running back. He's like, "No dice." I'm like, "No dice." I can only like I'm thinking this is crazy, and you know you're scanning the crowd. There's tons of people on this resort, and you see little kids running around, and you're like, "Is that him?" It's like not him, right? And you keep looking. Like we're going on like it's a bit now where like Alex is gone. It's like holy shit. Like
does Laura know, his wife?
No, we haven't contacted the ladies yet. And by the way, this is just such an example of like these idiots can't do one night with the kids while the women go out and have like a fucking nice evening. So we're panicking, and I'm like, okay, if I'm a kid, you know, if I'm a little tiny kid, where am I going to be? And right before we broke off for dinner with the ladies, Alex did run back to where his mom was sitting. We were sitting like at this bar area, and so I was like, I wonder if he would have went back to the last place where he saw his mom, right? Like Jug's run to the room, Sean is like checking all the other restaurants, and I go back over to like this sort of like little obscure area, and I'm just looking, and I walk down the steps and like hiding behind like a sign, like clearly scared. It's nighttime. It's pitch dark out. Is Alex. Like I'm like, because I see 2 kids kind of like with their parents, and then just like this kid kind of like hiding behind a sign. And I go, Alex. And he like turns around, he looks at me, like the relief like in my chest, because like the longer it goes.
Oh my God.
And there's pools everywhere. There's the beach that's just like a little 2-minute walk from the resort. Like, and this kid is like, he's a very energetic, like if you lose him for 10 minutes, he could have been, a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
So I see him and I go, hey, I'm your dad's friend, Mike. I didn't know what else to say. And because he clearly looked like he was a little shook. He was probably hiding behind that sign for the last, 10, 15 minutes. And when you're a kid, that probably felt like an hour when you can't find your parents.
Yeah.
So he was kind of just like quiet and shook. And then I came over and I picked him up and he was cool. Let me pick him up. And because I wanted to run back to Jug or whatever. And I was like, he's like, no, I want to walk. And I'm like, no, let me just get you back to your dad. So I run. I see Sean like halfway like through the resort, like whatever. I'm like, Das or whatever. He looks. I like point at Alex. He's like, have you told Jug? I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm carrying him. He's okay. I'll text him. And then Jug comes running from the other side of the resort. I'm like, there's your dad. And I like put him down and they run and sort of like meet in the middle. And it was like, but genuinely like, probably the scariest. This was my kid, but obviously, like, I love Jug, and you just desperately want to find him because every thought, all the worst goes through your mind. I can't even imagine what it was like for Jug during that 10, 15 minutes.
So it was 10, 15 minutes long altogether?
Yeah, the whole incident probably was that long, but felt much longer. And that's kind of my perception of it. I don't know. Like, again, we were all kind of just in a panic trying to find Alex, his son. And it was like one of those things too where we're like, do we tell? Like I'm like, listen, Jug, this is your, if you're going to tell your wife or whatever, like this is obviously a very traumatizing thing. Like, and you could tell Jug was shook. And even once we went back to the Mexican restaurant, oh, by the way, there was like another couple with like a baby that clearly they were like a seat over. They had watched this whole thing unfold, so they were just as invested in like the drama. So when we came in with the kid, like, I don't know, the mom kind of had a look like these guys are idiots, and the dad had a look like, oh, you guys pulled that one out, you lucky bastards. But it was crazy, man. But Jug did obviously tell his wife because it's such a big deal. But we didn't say anything until, I guess until his wife got back from having a nice night out, sort of deal. And I think, and honestly, I didn't know if I was going to tell the story because, it's like, I said, Jug was like, are you going to tell it on the pod? And I was like, I don't know. It's your story. I don't. And he's like, you can tell it. You can tell it.
Well, if it makes him feel any better, there's like every generation like has a story like in a family's lineage of losing the kid. Like that happens to every single parent. And like, or just like sort of like well-meaning but like absent-minded dads have like a long history. Like for instance, my dad was responsible for babysitting our neighbor's kids, Alex and Eli, when they were like, I don't know, 4 and 6 years old. They were like good friends of mine, and then their parents come home and Eli has my dad was not paying attention, and you with a crayon had a red line all over the walls from one end of the house to the other, and like my dad had no clue it had happened. So it's just like, I don't know, I feel like there's always examples of dads that are just dummies that mean the best but just can't quite do the job that a mother could.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then we're like, was it our fault? Did he ask us? But you're looking at your own kid, and it's like Alex followed him out, so we thought that they went together to the buffet to get the cucumbers. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, when he just sat down, he goes, "Where's Alex?" And I just looked over, and there's an empty seat, and his little like Spider-Man hat's like on the floor. Like it was like out of a movie,
yeah,
man. And then you have like
scary.
3 panicked dads just like scouring the resort. It was and it's like there's music playing, it's nighttime, there's families laughing, it's like you're at a carnival. It was right out of a movie. And once we all got back to the seats too, like Felix was like he's like, you guys really left me with the kids. They were starting to panic. I thought I was going to have to call Jess. like he was acting like he had the worst experience. Yeah. it was nuts, but all's well that ends well. And yeah, man, but well, I'm happy you told the story. I think we need to break the stigma of losing kids, and I think it only happens when we start telling these stories to each other. So good job, Mike. Totally. Well, I also wondered, what do you guys think? I mean, like, what's the resort's protocol? Like, let's say we couldn't have located him, and then we in that window of 10 to 15 minutes or whatever it was, and then we go to like the resort concierge. Like, do they have floodlights they put on? Do they have does staff mobilize? Like, they must have a protocol. It probably happens at all-inclusives all the time, I would think. But I was wondering, I'm like, what's the next step here if we can't find Alex? We're going to call the ladies. Like, I just didn't know what protocol was. I'm sure some listener knows the deal, but yeah.
Yeah, it probably is right. They put the floodlights on and they look. It's probably incredibly embarrassing.
Yeah, I don't know what that next step would have been, but we were getting very close to it if I didn't find him hiding behind that sign. But yeah, so that wraps up my vacation down south, which was awesome.
Yeah, good.
Little admendium to the last episode from 2 full weeks ago. But yeah, I think we'll be podding more, right, Maxie, when you're back?
Yeah. We'll get back in the swing of it. It'll be good.
How's LA been? Give us some LA stuff before we get to topics.
LA's good. We're staying in this Airbnb. I'm down here with the band, just doing this and that, and we're all living together, which has been pretty fun. You know, when you go to the West Coast, like you're always on like East Coast time still. So I still am waking up at like 6:30 every morning, which is very early for me, but I feel very productive. We did a fun thing though last night. We got invited to this production of Frankenstein at this like fancy Beverly Hills theater. But it was it was probably a theater about the size of 100 people. And I didn't know anything about Frankenstein other than this sort of like the cartoon version of Frankenstein. So I thought, I was like, are we going to like a comedy? Or like what are we getting? And then they explained to me, like, Max, this is definitely not a comedy. Like, Frankenstein is a drama about like the human experience and how we interact with technology, et cetera, et cetera.
You're thinking of Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. And also, I think there's been like
Mel Brooks
cartoons and like goofy versions of Frankenstein, like in my mind. And anyway, so the production starts off, and it's like it's a modern interpretation of it, from what I understand. But there's this guy dressed up in like 19th century like British sailor like wardrobe, and he's singing this like sea shanty. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this is gonna be fucking terrible. Like, I hate this song. It's like nothing about this is impressive. It's like it's the kind of music that you kind of want to blow your brains out to. But pretty quickly,
I like Max as a theater critic, by the way. This is a nice turn for you.
Well, I was like, who likes this kind of music? This is like, I can't think of one demographic that likes this kind of music.
Like, give us an example. Like sea shanties? Like what's he singing?
It was sort of a cross between like a Celtic sea shanty, but with very drony, atonal, minor key music. It's just like and with old timey language, and I can't understand old timey language at all. Like if anybody does like Shakespeare or anything like that, or anything like prior to 1930, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like my ears just don't compute it. But then it ended up being this incredible play. So like basically after the opening thing, like the set changes. And all the musicians that were on the stage, like playing violins and like percussion instruments and guitar, they come out and everyone's like kind of naked, but just with like belt straps around their private parts, and they're still playing instruments, and then they're dancing around, and then the lighting cues are hitting at the perfect time, and there's all this like sound work, like sound effects that like. Anyway, it was just like one visual sensation after the next.
Are you sure that you were at a play and not at a party at Donald Sterling's house?
Yeah, it was actually it was a recreation of Eyes Wide Shut. But then the songs got better, and then you realize that like the cast, which is probably about 12 people, can like sing, dance, and play instruments. And there's all these moving parts that happen so seamlessly. And as a guy who performs for a living, I'm always blown away when you go see a production, usually outside of the world of like indie rock, when people are really dialed in and there's like so much attention to detail. And it's a 70-minute play, and each part of it was incredible, and I recommend it. It's playing for the night. If you're in LA and you're listening, it's playing at some theater in Beverly Hills. DM us, I'll send you the info. But it was great. But it was the thing actually I enjoyed most about it is that it just started off so badly, or I just was thinking to myself, what am I getting myself into? Like, I was just thinking about what the rest of the guys in the band were thinking. It's like, oh man, we spent $60 a ticket each on this. Like, ugh, good lord. And then it ended up blowing all of our minds. So kudos to that show. You fucking did it.
Amazing. I heard you hung out with my brother in LA.
I did. We had a great night. We ended up going. Oh shit! Am I getting nights confused? What did I do with your brother? He came by the house, and then.
Man, that story's awesome.
The pod everyone's been waiting for.
No, hold on. But okay, I totally forget what I did with your brother, but it was great to see him. He seems like he's doing great. But we did have a night with Unzi, where we met up at this sort of fancy bar in Silver Lake called Stella. And Unzi was there with our friend Tim McAuliffe, former podcast, and we got word that Beck was also at this place, and he was there for dinner with the ladies from Haim. So we thought this was very exciting that we might get a chance to see him. And then we also ended up hanging out with one of the actresses, and I forget her name, on Working Moms, who came to our live show. She was there in the house when we did our Catherine Reitman interview for the pod, and she was like, "Oh, how are the guys doing?" She was asking about you. She still made reference to Shane asking about that Ivan Reitman money.
Yeah. Ghostbuster money, yeah.
Yeah, the Ghostbuster money, and she really loved that, and so it was a good Canadian hang in LA with lots of like very, very funny people.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's been good. It's been sort of productive down here, but also like lots of fun hangs.
I heard that Ash was saying that your Airbnb is like the mansion from Clue. Like there's like weird trap doors and stuff.
Yeah, it's there's like the host of the Airbnb, the guy who owns the house, he like left this like kind of riddle scavenger hunt, and there's like all these like weird books and shelves and like little like there's a pulley that connects to a gong, like an actual gong in the house. Right now I'm actually recording in this like pool house area out in the garden. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hell of a scene. I'll show you guys photos. But it's been good. We've been having a good time down here. Shane, what's going on with you?
It's hard to remember all the stuff that's gone. It feels like it's been a year since we've recorded.
Totally.
I know probably every single person I know, and people I don't know at all have messaged me about the Enneagram test.
Oh yeah,
Ooh, that's a big deal.
Like every single one of our friends have asked me what number they are, and then people I don't even know have been asking me to assess them, and so that's been interesting, and I'm learning more about that, and like in-laws, I've been assessing them, and
this is your new business.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if I'm nailing it every time, but that's been kind of interesting to learn more about that. And you've been trying to set me up with a. No, saying shrink is negative, right? Like they don't like to be called. What is it? She's a student.
She's a PhD student. She's going to be a psychologist, so she's been doing it for a number of years. Her friend Erica. So I want her to assess you, but it was funny because when I talked to her on the phone, I was trying, because we're just trying to create entertaining content. So I was like, yeah, you could do like a real deal session, and you could record it, and then we could kind of come on the pod and just make fun of Shane, and it'll be fucking hilarious. And then basically, she was just like, this sort of goes against every one of my like codes and ethics as a professional psychologist. I literally can't do anything you suggested to me, Max.
Well, I was at a sales rally party. And, people were drinking, and there's a bunch of loud music, a live band, and she called me. So I answer the phone, and it seems like I'm just at the wildest party ever, and she wants to talk about...
Shane, come back to the pool!
Yeah. Well, she wants to talk about when we can set up my assessment. So I'm like, hey, yeah, this isn't the best time, but let's talk about it. My phone's at 1%, by the way, so if it dies, I'm not being rude. Anyway, I get through the conversation. I tell her to call me tomorrow. And she didn't call me on the Friday, so I don't know if she thought
that's not going to help with your abandonment issues.
It's not, seriously, you kid, but I do have those. And I don't know if it left off where she thinks I'm a sketch bag, but I definitely think she's a sketch bag for not calling me back. So tell her that.
Okay, I will pass that along. That's good. But
what therapist would do that?
This relationship's already off to an adversarial start. It's gonna.
Yeah, I just found it odd that someone would do that. I was kind of trusting her to analyze me.
Well, we'll just have to do it under professional circumstances where we're not making a mockery of the profession. That's basically what we have to do.
But we can have fun without making fun. You know what I mean?
That's the sweet spot. I still have never taken the Enneagram test. I just took your assessment at face value, but I'll see like sometimes like people will say they've taken the test. Like it seems like everyone's taken the test.
Well, my assessment of you was actually based off of a pod listener's assessment.
Right.
And I never know whether to say pod listener or to actually name the person, because I've named names before and people have told me don't do that. So I'll just say the pod listener. But she was saying a 9, but I've kind of maybe altered my assessment of you.
Dan Hamilton gave me another one too.
What did he say, 6?
He said I was a 9 with 8.
Okay, because I would think a 9 with 6.
Interesting. Again, I've never taken the test. I should take it, but
because the 6 one has like there's a slight element of like paranoia, to it, where a person's like they have a little bit of suspicion or paranoia, or they're
like skeptical
of things and aware of possible negative outcomes.
Right.
And I find that would be a main trait of yours, in addition to being gregarious, friendly, and approachable.
Sure. Yeah, I try to be. My big thing with any sort of undertaking is I become comfortable with the worst possible outcome. Meaning, if this is the worst that can happen and I can live with that, then I proceed. Do you know what I mean? So, like, my brain is always assessing all outcomes. Like, well, this is the best possible outcome. We could be wildly successful. The worst possible outcome is, it might be a little bit embarrassing to fail. Then it's worth it. If it's like the worst possible outcome is I could die, I won't do that thing. Do you know what I mean? So I definitely am always kind of assessing those things. I hope I don't lean too negative, though. But
No, but everyone has their little hang-up.
Oh, yeah.
Things, you know,
For sure.
like there's no Enneagram type that is immune from faults.
Yeah.
Like 7 seems great, but 7 has a whole litany of problems associated with it, and that's people like Alex and my father-in-law.
Max, did you take the test, or did you just take Shane's assessment at its face value?
I couldn't be bothered to take the test, but I like the assessment. The assessment kind of worked for me, and I carried on.
Oh yeah, I'm keeping 9. That was nice.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I just remembered what I did with your brother Greg, by the way.
Ooh, I like it. It's like hit us.
Yes. So we ended up going to this bowling alley. It's called the Highland Bowl, which has been around since like the 1920s. Everybody warned us that the bowling is actually incredibly expensive, but the venue itself looks amazing, which it does. It's like this this high ceilings, and like the bar, everything just like looks original, like the booths and they have like these 2 main bars in the bowling alley. It's like, just think about if the ballroom was like the actually fucking hip, as opposed to something that was like built 10 years ago or whatever. No offense to the ballroom, but this
It's my watering hole, man.
Yeah, it's one of your favorite spots. But one of the things that happened, which was kind of interesting, it was just like, I think it was like a Friday night, so it was kind of like, you know, it was a happening night. There was a lot of people in the bar, and we had a booth, and we were just, you know, having a beer and catching up or whatever. And then all of a sudden the music got super fucking loud, and like Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix started to play. And then I turn around, and there's this spotlight, and there's a spotlight that's being operated by a guy who's operating the spotlight on like the ground next to me. So it's not coming from above, it's coming from like 10 feet to my left. And then all of a sudden this burlesque dancer comes out, and she starts dancing like a madwoman to Foxy Lady, and then she starts taking off all of her clothes, and she is revealing she has like tassels on her nipples. And then she does one song, and then she just leaves, and then everybody goes back to their conversation. But it was pretty amazing, and she ended up doing that again about 45 minutes later. But I just thought, like, it kind of gave the energy of the night a real like jolt.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone just sitting around catching up with friends, having a casual conversation, and then this sort of like this burst of sort of sex energy kind of comes in the room. Everybody just sort of like perks up, and like it was kind of crazy. It was like kind of doing like a shot or something like that, where and then everybody carried on. But anyway, I just think it was an interesting idea that I would be interested. I'd like to see maybe more, you know, local bars try that.
Why not do it in the office?
Yeah, do it in the office. And it was a form of dance that seemed kind of traditional, and like there was like, because LA has a big kind of burlesque culture here. There's like a lot of bars that I was talking to one of my friends down here. He's like, oh yeah, there's like kind of a thing in LA where like burlesque is like very much part of the culture. And the dancing is very cool, and it doesn't really feel objectifying. It just feels like there's just like an energy to it that is very sort of fun to be around. And then you know, she comes back 45 minutes later, so it's not like all about that, but it's just like a part of that bar's experience. So I just thought
the definition of burlesque is like classy stripping. Would you say that's it?
Yeah, but there's like a history to it. Yeah, that like when it comes to the dress and the kind of music. And the type of dance that I think.
What's the goal of it?
I think the goal is just to give everybody a bit of a boost. It's like have a shot without having to do a shot.
Right. Okay. But
yeah,
they're trying to be sexy, right?
No, it's definitely a sexy thing, but I think it's just like it's an exciting thing. That's not like, you know, because I find like strip clubs are the idea of strip clubs are like kind of depressing to me for many different reasons. But this does not have any of that in it. So. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool.
I feel like this pod is doing wonders for Los Angeles tourism. Like you've been describing this amazing time you've had, the theater, the bowling alley with the burlesque.
Yeah, and I gotta say, the food down here is so good. We've been eating in this place called Home State. If you have a chance, there's 2 locations in LA, but like amazing like Tex-Mex food. Yeah, goddamn, yeah, it's been fun, and the weather's been good. I don't want to tell anybody back home that it's been beautiful and sunny, but it's been like perfectly 22 degrees every single day. Oh, also, I've been hooping every day. I don't know, you've probably seen this on our Instagram, but there's a rec center around the corner from our place, Yosemite Rec Center, and I've been playing every single day, and I've been amazing, and people are like, this guy is fucking the best basketball player I've ever seen. And I wear my Toronto Raptors championship shirt, and I tell everybody like that I'm the champ, and it's been going great. It's a very like
what do you
Mexican
think the key is?
neighborhood.
Is the level of talent just not great, or are you just playing way better?
No, I've just gotten a little better on this trip, and I just like I went like 4 for 5 from 3 last game. I was just like throwing up like Steph Curry threes, and everything was swishing. It was kind of crazy. I've like never felt better.
Are any of the other guys in the band going and playing with you?
No, they're not as interested in hoops. Oh, hey Mike, I wanted to just ask you about your night last night with your brother, because it was the 1-year anniversary of the passing of your dad, and I was thinking about you too, and I was wondering if there's any Roy stories that you wanted to share, or how you were feeling, if you're into talk about that.
Oh yeah. No, it was nice. So Danica and Winona and I went and met up with my brother and his girlfriend Laura, and we just had some dinner and sort of shared Roy stories. We had some tall cans of Coors Light in my dad's honor, and and then like Danica and left with the baby so she could go to bed, and then Greg and I stayed with Laura actually, and Dan Hamilton ended up joining us, and because Dan was kind of like a third, like a bunch of you, like Veerman brothers, like he, my dad was at Dan's wedding and stayed the night and all that. They had a pretty good relationship. So, yeah, it was just really nice to sort of on the anniversary, and his birthday is actually on March 2nd, my dad's, and we're gonna go out with some family and do some stuff for that. But just kind of to sort of keep the stories alive. I mean, we tell lots of Roy Boy stories anyway, but it was nice to sort of, I can't believe a year has passed. It feels like it wasn't that long ago when the three of us and my brother were doing a podcast remembering my dad, and it kind of, it's been in my mind. I wouldn't say it creeped up on me, and it has been in my mind, and yeah, it feels weird, but life kind of continues on, and yeah, it's just nice to have a night like that where we got a little bit drunk on Coors Light and some Jaeger and some Jamesons, and then we just shared good stories. Yeah, it was a good night though.
I was thinking about the dynamic of having Laura there, because Laura is Greg's new girlfriend, and she I'm sure Greg's talked a lot about his dad to Laura, but to have there's a new audience, Mike. It must have been fun to tell Laura those stories, because you're such an expert storyteller. I'm sure Laura loved it, because Roy has so many good ones.
Yeah, I was actually telling Shane this morning that it was cool having her there, because me, Dan, and Greg know all the same stories, right? Like we've told them a bunch, so it was actually like a new person to ask questions and sort of tell the stories to. But yeah, she was great. It was and it was also like I said in the other pod, like we lost our mom quite a while ago as well, so we ended up talking quite a bit about our mom, and because we were so much younger when our mom passed away, I don't think we sort of like. Our dad was just around much longer, so there's sort of like more stories, and it's more fresh, but in a nice way, sort of getting together to remember my dad, because we don't really have one of those things for my mom, just because it was so long ago that we don't like get together on like any sort of anniversary of anything. But we ended up just sort of talking about them both a lot last night, and just sort of our life, and how those things go. You're sitting in a pub, and the more you drink, the more loose you get. You laugh a little harder. The sad stories or the sort of more poignant things hit a little harder, and then you kind of just you're happy to be surrounded by people that you love, remembering somebody that you loved. So yeah, it was nice.
By the way, we can cut any of this that you want to talk about, but I was kind of curious, like what are the, like obviously grief comes in waves, and there's no right or wrong way to deal with it, but what have been the moments in the last year, would you say, like have made you feel the best, and what have been maybe like some like the hardest moments when you're by yourself, or is there anything in particular that you can like point to that like, oh, this felt good, or as good as it could feel in thinking about your dad, and this is or this wave hits me on certain days of the week or something? Is there anything you can
I'd say it definitely, whenever Winona kind of like hits a new milestone or does something new, it's always like I'm happy, and then there's this little kind of like thing inside me that goes, shit, like my dad would have really liked this, like my dad would have, now that she's getting funny and has a little personality, I'm like, I'm always happy because I'm like, this is great, but then there's always this little tiny percentage of sadness where I just go, shit, dad would have liked that. So those things happen. I found that the Raptors championship, and even when I think back on it, it has kind of like a little bit of a bittersweet thing because my dad was such a big sports fan. He knew how much I love the Raptors. Like, it's just something that we could have like had. I think like, he definitely would have came to watch a couple finals games or came to Toronto. Like, so when I think back on that happening, it's always like, I still can't believe it happened. One, two, I'm like, man, that was crazy. And I think of all the good times we have going to the games, hanging with you guys. And then I always inevitably have that thought where I go, shit, like, man, I wish he had stuck, or like he was able to stick around for that. Like, I wish he got that far because it was such an extraordinary thing, and it'd been so long since sort of like a Toronto team has won anything, and I just, it would have been something we could have like really done together that absolutely would have been like organic and fun and joyful. So yeah, I mean, those things kind of like any milestone stuff or like stuff that I think, damn it, dad would have enjoyed that. You just get those little things where it kind of like dulls the happiness just slightly, just color. If not dull, it colors it a little bit more blue when really fun or nice things happen because you just go, I wish that person was around to see that. I feel that way about our mom too. Like, like she missed out on so much stuff because we were so young that like it's not as sort of like tangible, whereas my dad got to meet our granddaughter or his granddaughter, our daughter. So it's like, yeah, I think that's the way it is for me. Like, I just like whenever something kind of good happens, you just go, I wish that he got to sort of see that because he would have enjoyed it. So that's the way that I sort of experience it. Yeah, and then leading up to it, I was thinking a lot about him just because this time of year, actually, Danica, my wife, her mom passed away too, and I was saying how I was surprised because I don't necessarily get like emotional on like anniversaries or things like that. I don't really like celebrate milestones just naturally, but I found as we were getting closer and closer to this time when he passed away, I was getting kind of in a funk, or I felt that I felt the presence. It was kind of around, and I was telling her that, and she said, it actually is very weird. She's like, because her mom passed away a few years ago in October, and she said that she gets a feeling like it's the weather, it's the atmosphere, that it reminds her of that time, and you can't really shake it. And I was like, that's totally what it is. It's like it was almost like leaving, the end of January going into February. It's like I'm just remembering, this time last year my dad was alive. We just were talking about this. My dad was, we was making jokes about the Marc Gasol trade at the trade deadline. I'm like, and then the trade deadline passes for the NBA and there's no messages going back and forth. You know what I mean? And so I felt it coming. And who knows what it will be like next year. But it'll pass. But it brings you back to last year. For me, it did. And then it was interesting talking to her, and she was saying that she felt the same way, or she feels the same way whenever sort of that time of year comes up for when her mom passed away. But yeah,
the that sensation is always really fascinating to me. About like the seasonal thing that happens when something that you've been through that is like particularly traumatic, like it goes off again at that time of year. And our drummer Tim lost his mother when he would have been 20-ish, I want to say, and I know, and it was around, I think it was Remembrance Day, so it's like November 11th, and I think that time of year is tough for him, and that in our tune Leather Jacket, that's like, I think Danica's actually like messaging me about that lyric, like in September when it goes off like a goddamn alarm clock,
yeah,
it hits you like a third shot, conversations you just stare off, there's no longer a voice calling, when you go out I'll be home waiting for you. Like, that's just literally about somebody thinking about someone approaching that particular time of year in their life, and it just being shitty and hard. So anyway, love you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Actually, one thing I do want to mention, my brother said, because Greg and he was in LA doing stuff with the Toronto Football Club and all that stuff, and but we did message, and he was like, hey man, like, we're coming up on the date, how you feeling? I'm like, oh, hey, like, I'm good, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, how are you? And he was saying that him and his girlfriend Laura, my dad loved that movie, The Commitments. And I don't know how many of our listeners know this movie, but it's like a movie about, I believe, an Irish like bar band. Do you know this movie, Max?
Yeah, they're like a soul band, though, right?
Yeah. Did you remember this movie, Shane?
No.
It was like our dad loved this, and we watched it. Like we had the Commitment soundtrack in our house. It's like Mustang Sally. You know, it's like sort of like you said, soul rock band. They're Irish, I believe, and they kind of like become sort of popular, and it's like they formed this band, and people love. Like my dad loved this movie, so I guess him and Laura watched The Commitments this weekend, and then drank some Jaeger and some Jamesons in my dad's honor. And I just thought, I was like, that is something that my dad would have loved. The fact that you guys were watching this movie that we probably haven't watched in like 25 years. And so Greg's like, yeah, he's like, I'll lend it to you. So I'm going to watch The Commitments in honor of Roy Boy, and I'll let you guys know if it's good. My brother said it held up. My brother said it's still good. And then they went out and they're trying to find the soundtrack on vinyl now. So
We should do it on the pedestal.
oh shit, that's a great idea.
Yeah, could be a good tribute.
And also an amazing segue to say, check out The Pedestal with Shane, myself, Jonathan Popoulos. All sorts of episodes and lots coming up. But I would love to do it on The Pedestal. That's actually a great idea.
I think we're going to have Jay on the pedestal soon.
That's right, Maxie. Former podcast Jay Onright is coming on The Pedestal next week.
Oh, really? That's amazing.
Yeah, he chose. We're allowed to give away, right? He chose.
I think so.
He chose. I wanted to say Groundhog Day, but that's not right. He chose Caddyshack.
Yeah.
Both Bill Murray.
Oh,
movies.
cool.
Yeah, so we're gonna do Caddyshack with Jay Onright on The Pedestal.
I love that's a great crossover. You should, maybe Tom Power would do one as well.
Oh.
Just to get these guys back because they're such good media, movie, pop culture people. So they'd have great opinions.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you guys want to do some topics? Some stuff that's been happening in the news?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, I know that we've been accused at times of maybe overly talking about the NBA because we all are big NBA fans. But I think this is actually a cool story. Just because of sort of what it represents. But the NBA had their All-Star weekend this past weekend, and the All-Star game, they changed the format on Sunday night. So in the past, it was like they would play the game 4 quarters just like any other NBA game, and it's always been very low energy. Nobody's really trying in the game. So it's been criticized by fans that are like, this game's sort of bullshit. It's just a dunk contest. Like, why would anybody care? They've tried to incentivize it in the past. And so they changed it this year, like pretty radically. They decided to go to this thing called the Elam ending, which is basically you play the first 3 quarters like a regular basketball game. It's like timed, like whatever, 12 minutes, and you do the score. And in this case, they were resetting the score every quarter, but you still kept a full tally, so that when you got to the 4th quarter, you had the scores. And at the end of every quarter, they had a charity that would either get $100,000 or half that. I'm not quite sure how the splits worked, but it was like they had the kids in the arena, like sort of cheering these guys on to try and win these quarters, so that their charity would get the money. And then in the 4th quarter, this is the radical change, they got rid of the clock, so there's no timed thing. They took the scores and then they added 24 to the highest score in honor of Kobe Bryant because he wore number 24, and then the first team to hit the target score just wins the game. So when they announced they were doing this, there was like a ton of jokes like, I don't get it, don't make me do math, all this stuff. People thought it was more complicated than it was actually going to be. But really, it's just kind of like pickup. Like when you play pickup, you don't have a clock. You just play to 11 or you play to 7 or whatever you're going to play to. So that's kind of what it is. And so it kind of like harkens back to days on the playground. It had this amazing effect where not only the charity stuff for each quarter kind of like awarding the money to charity, because it seemed like guys played harder. Like the Giannis team in the first quarter was down by 12, and then Giannis came out in the second quarter and was kind of like, fuck this, and just was like, let's play intensely. And the sort of like the intensity of the game started picking up. By the time they get to the 4th quarter and they turn off the clock, like guys were going like it was a playoff game. Like I know both of you guys watched this game, but one of the reasons I like this story before we sort of I open it up is that like I love when an organization takes a chance by doing something that is sort of like ostensibly radical, and everybody's like, this is stupid, blah blah blah, why would you change it? And then it actually works. And listen, it could have failed, it could have sucked, but it's like the game kind of sucked anyway. So it's like I love that the NBA is the sort of league that takes these sort of chances, that they're innovative, that they're like, yeah, let's experiment with this. And then it ended up being, I think, more successful and more exciting for people watching and the players playing in the game than they could have ever hoped for. What did you guys think? I'll go to Shane first.
I thought sometimes I look up previous All-Star games, and I'm always searching what was the best All-Star game ever. And in 2001, there was this amazing All-Star game that came down to the final moments. And Vince Carter was in the game, but Allen Iverson and Kobe were kind of going at each other a little bit. It came down to the last shot, and Vince actually celebrated early because he thought his team had won. But Chris Webber actually got a rebound and did a bunny shot but the bunny shot just bounced out. So there's this awesome, like, don't celebrate too early moment where Vince is like, yeah, as Chris Webber is missing the bunny. But had that bunny shot gone in, it would have been the best ending ever in All-Star Game history, and this hilarious don't celebrate too early moment. But anyway, that was 19 years ago. So this game really harkened back to that. And with the addition of I was messaging you as jokingly calling them orphans in the crowd, like to have like disadvantaged people looking up and cheering for their team and knowing that $100,000 is on the line. That is immense real world pressure to put on these players.
Yeah.
Which, the tension and the energy is undeniable when something like that is going on. Like,
yeah,
it was insane and unintentionally comical to be cutting to a kid who represents a charity as a player is either hitting or missing a free throw.
It was people that element of it has been criticized, like it's a little dystopian or like Hunger Games-y, where it's like,
I was laughing my ass off. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about the joy that the kids get, and I think that both charities get like, it's not like it's like one would get 100 and then the other one would get like 50 or something. Like if one side had led all three quarters, I think the other charity would have been. I think they had a way to even it out.
50 grand might matter a lot to these kids.
Totally agree. I agree that element, I think they will change next year, because there was something a little bit like voyeuristic and kind of like it felt uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Although
it made it way
compelling
more
TV.
It made it way more interesting. It felt like a movie from like the 80s where you're playing like a gladiator game show, except it's real and there's lava on the ground and you die if you lose or something.
Totally. Maxie, what'd you think of the game?
Oh, I loved it. Like, yeah, it was so much fun. And I didn't understand. I knew they made some rule changes, but I didn't know exactly what they were. I hadn't really been paying close attention. And I was hanging with Mike, and I was like, oh, how much more time is there left in the game? Because Mike was watching on his computer. And he goes, there's 10 points left. And I'm like, is Mike having a stroke right now? There's 10 points left to how much time? Like, does Mike know how basketball works? And then when they explained to me what was going on, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because the great thing about when you play up to like 11 or 21 or whatever is that you could be watching just random dudes at, the YMCA, or when we were playing a 3-on-3 tournament, just like watching other games. And if it's tight, like, even if the basketball is shit, it's still fucking super exciting. You know what I mean? Just like knowing that everyone's just going for that final point total. So awesome to see like the best players in the world basically participate in a YMCA style match, which was so fucking wicked.
Well, the big argument to implement this, I mean, they use it in the basketball tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if they start using it in the G League in the next couple of years. People say that it's too radical for them to ever actually put it in the NBA, but like, I don't think it's crazy, man. Like, I've been thinking about it the last few days, and like, I was listening to this guy, Nick Elam, I think is his name. That's why they call it the Elam ending. He's like an MIT guy or like a Mensa guy that was obsessed with hoops, and he played a little bit in high school. He came up with this ending, and I think it is so good. And his argument is basically, it's like, the reason he came up with this is he was watching basketball. He's watching a college game, and there was so much fouling down the stretch to try and like catch up, and it was stopping the game. And he's like, this is so like boring, and it's taking so damn long. He's like, why is this? What's causing this problem? He's like, it's the clock. If you just turn the clock off, we wouldn't have this problem. So he comes up with this sort of way, and the idea of the target score and all that stuff. But his big argument for why this is actually really good for like viewers, for the players, is every game would end basically on what feels like a buzzer beater. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like when you have a target score, he says he's seen this like in action. They've done like sample size and stuff with the basketball tournament. But like, so for instance, if you have a target score and then LeBron James has the ball in the last possession, like he can jack it up and win it dead. It's over, and it eliminates overtime. There's no more overtime in NBA games. Like, it's just I don't know, man. Like, maybe I'm crazy and I'm just still like high off of how fun that game was. But I would not be against the NBA going to a target score in the fourth quarter.
Do you like the disadvantaged children in the crowd?
No, I mean, the more I watched it in a bar with Dan Hamilton, so it was like the commentate. Like, I didn't hear any of the audio, so like I wasn't even totally aware. Like, I know they kept cutting to the kids, but when you're in a bar, all you see is kids cheering, and it feels good. You're like, oh, they're getting something. I didn't really sort of contextualize that element of it until sort of afterward. You know what I mean?
Well, the one kid was waiting on a heart transplant.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, he shouldn't have been watching that intense game then. That was,
they're only 50 grand short, Bill. It's a big free throw for Anthony Davis.
Oh shit. I don't know. Would you be, Max, if they went to the Elam ending or target score in the fourth quarter in actual NBA games or playoffs, would you be against or for that?
Yeah, I'm sort of torn because on one hand, like, I hear a voice in my head going, it's like, well, that's gonna like mess with, like, I don't know, all the NBA traditions and like the point totals and the records and all that stuff. Like, so the conservative part of me goes, well, how is that going to mess with the way we conceive of NBA history? But then the more sort of like fun, liberated part of me goes, no, this is just fucking awesome, and I loved it. And it was so, you're on something there, Mike. Just knowing that LeBron James could end it on a 3 was like, when it came down to that final like 2 points or whatever, it was amazing. The one thing I will say though is that I listened to that interview on Zach Lowe's podcast with, was his name Nick Elam?
Yeah.
Is that the guy's name?
Yeah, I listened to that. It was great.
By the way, the fact that we have to call this fucking thing Elam's ending is insane to me. It's not like he came up with a theory of physics or some shit. It's just like he just came up with a hilarious basketball idea, and everybody in the NBA is calling it Elam's ending.
But
Stop
he came
it.
up with it. He invented it.
No. He was a little too pleased with himself.
Oh my
He's got to
goodness.
be called something else.
Lou Gehrig just got a disease, and they called it after him, and he didn't do shit to get that disease.
like when you hear how much research Elam did and how how comprehensive it is, and how he had like 3,000 game tapes that he watched to try to come to the perfect idea of a target score and all that. I think it should be called the Elam ending. And in fact,
with you, Mike.
the NBA hasn't been calling it that, if you've noticed in all their press releases. So guys like Zach Lowe and the press are going out of their way to make sure that Elam is taken care of. But he was very pleased with himself in that interview. But I think he was the right line of promoting his idea, and really stoked that they actually used it.
Okay, I might be able to be swayed, but just at first glance, I was like, "Give me a break, you nerd!"
Oh my god!
It's like we're just like talking about like literally an idea that I fucking do at the YMCA like every week, and now everybody has to call it after this nerd from Boise State.
Man.
Like, get out of here.
Wow, you're right. Man, I thought you'd be in the sunshine, feeling good, hanging out in the Clue House. Instead, you're coming in hot.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I do. Yeah, no, it's fun to talk about. But yeah, it made me think though, guys. Just off the top of your mind, is there? And I put this in the group. Is there anything in pop culture, entertainment, sports that you're like, they need to change this up and do it this way? Anything come to mind?
Well, I think the Oscars could be totally rejigged, and I think they probably will, because the ratings keep tanking so poorly. But
That's a good one.
they could make that more entertaining or captivating, or something on the line, or.
Yeah, do you think you change like the voting process sort of deal, or do you think you just is it more? Yeah, it feels like it's in need of reform. The Oscars, just because again, we were such an Oscars family. Like my mom, we would get the ballot and TV guide, and we would literally fill it out, and we would watch it on Sundays. My mom would have a little bit of champagne. My brother and I, since we were little kids, we would watch the Oscars, and I've missed it 2 of the last 3 years. Traveling or whatever, but I didn't even tape it. Like we used to do, Shaney. We used to always get together and do the Oscars, the whatever you call them, ballots.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then we'd all throw in $20. But yeah, I have not really been that interested in it in the last couple of years, and so it feels like it's. I don't know if that's just because I'm growing out of it, or if it is in need of reform.
I think too, having kids fucks it up a little bit, because you can't exactly get out of the house, and something as frivolous as like an Oscar party seems like not worth it to get a babysitter.
That's true.
But I do think if maybe they got like some like a subsection of, as Max would call them, nerds, like film nerds, and like all across the country or something.
Yeah.
And they all voted. And they represented, like, maybe there's one representation of each province or state. And then that happens instead of this weird committee of I think people.
It's like it's anybody that's been nominated for an Oscar gets to be put in the Academy, and then their Academy voting. I think it's like 1,300 people. I was actually looking at a breakdown the other day, but it's something like 1,300 people are in the Academy, or maybe it's 3,000 people. It's not a crazy large number.
But it's since mainly people involved who have won and been associated have been white. It's just a big pool of white people.
Yep, definitely.
So maybe just to make it more diverse, they figure out some other way, and then, or maybe the general public can vote.
Nay.
But then, really...
The Avengers would be winning everything.
Exactly. But maybe the art films are chosen by them, and they're voted on by the public.
Maybe we'll consult Elam, see what he says about it.
Yeah, I mean, The issue with the awards thing, just quickly, is that it's like it's hard to find that sweet spot because you want a show with a lot of eyeballs, but you also want to make sure, and so that would mean like some like the bigger films might get nominated, but you also want to show that critics will like. It's just hard to satisfy every type of audience in one show, and you see this happen a lot with like in the music world. It's like people kind of roll their eyes at the Grammys. Because they go too wide and they go too old. But as soon as you get into anything that's like more like critics pick, like if you look at like the Pitchfork top 50 albums of the year, you haven't heard of literally 46 of the artists. You know what I mean? And then so that sort of alienates to a wider audience. So it's like it is a very tough thing. It's like what is the most entertaining show, but that is also representative of the best shit. And what does even the best shit mean? Like, what is that term like? That's different to each person. So I don't know. I don't know if I have like a good solution. But I guess when it comes to the Oscars, like how you'd make it more entertaining in itself, that's a interesting question. I don't know. Did you guys like that they didn't really have a host this year?
I still haven't seen the show. To
Me
be
either.
honest.
Yeah, I didn't watch it.
Maxie, what do you think is in need of reform?
I'm just going to steal this idea from Ryan Russillo. And I just want to, for our pod listeners, Ryan Russillo, one of my favorite sports dudes, was on Bill Simmons' show last week. And they were talking about moving the start date of the NBA season to basically November or December, so the season went into July.
I heard
August,
this, yeah.
for like the final. And I was thinking, and I was like, we always get so fucking depressed in July and August when there's no sports on, aside for like the middle of the baseball season, which is kind of boring. And so I was thinking, oh, that would be a pretty cool idea, I think, if they did that. And it feels kind of radical because we're so used to the basketball season starting, at the beginning of November or late October. But I was like, why not? Like, what is keeping? Why are we so beholden to this calendar? So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It'd make free agency better for Toronto, I'll tell you that much. Because the one thing that Jays guys always love is that they're here for the summer, right? And Toronto's beautiful in the summer. But if you're like a guy from Southern California, playing in Toronto in January, February, December is pretty tough. So if we shifted the season, I'm all for it as a Toronto fan.
That's so smart. I didn't think that. That's so good.
But yeah, if Russillo was saying that they basically could own the summer because like there's nothing going on. August is dead, right? So it's like I'd be for it. I'd be all for it.
And I was also reading a tweet or something, and it was saying that we should change the amount of days in a month to 28 and make every month have 28 days. And it would make a lot of things make a lot more sense because each week would be like an actual 7-day week.
Yeah, why are we using such a jagged calendar based on something from... That's a good one. Yeah. We've talked about the 4-day work week. Right? Longer, like work 10 hours a day for 4 days a week.
That would be so much better.
Be amazing. These are some good ones, guys.
Good.
Well, Maxie, should we wrap it up, or do you want to go into the Dems?
No more daylight savings time either.
This is the Shane Stump speech. Speaking of politics, we're not doing a Shane surprise this week.
Oh wait, no surprise. I was just going to weigh myself real quick. I know Mike doesn't want to probably, and I'm not saying that based on like it's not like you look bad. It's just you've alluded that you don't want to, unless you do want.
I'll do when we're all together. So you brought the scale today.
I brought the scale because I just said on this day, if the results are bad,
Shane, weigh yourself. I'm kind of curious to know. I don't want to weigh myself. I've been hating myself.
So. Okay, we can edit it out if it's not interesting.
No, fuck it. Let's do this. This is truly Shane's surprise. What do you remember what you were last episode, or the episode we weighed you last?
I was okay. So right off the top, I was 199. Oh, and then I was 194, I think.
Okay, so
yeah,
here we go.
A time period. Very curious.
Okay, Shane is pulling out the scale. It is down. Shane is he's wearing a belt, a t-shirt, and pants and socks, so that will affect the weighing. Here we go. Shane is at 191.8. What are your thoughts on that?
That's not great because I was on another scale in the gym and I guess I wasn't wearing a belt and I was wearing more like shorts and it said I was 189. But whatever. Yeah.
That's pretty good though, Shane. I gotta say, so you've already dropped 8 pounds?
Yeah, it's not where I wanted though.
That's still pretty amazing.
I guess when are we going to all weigh each other?
Yeah, so for our listeners, this is going to be the pod. They're going to get this pod this week, and then we doing another one next week. Maxie, you're back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be back next week.
Okay, so look forward to that, guys.
Didn't instill too much confidence.
No, I just don't. I'm just thinking of my own weight and how much heavy food and Mexican food I've been eating down here, and I'm just really mad at myself right now.
Oh man, you've been hooping every day. You're lighting it up down there.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
All right, well, can't wait to get you back, buddy.
All right, see you guys.